Perhaps many years from now, when you have children or grandchildren of your own, one of them will ask you about a November day a long time ago when a former sports announcer named Dutch Reagan came to town for the last campaign. And should that happen, and since I won't be able to myself, I hope you'll tell them for me that I said it wasn't true, that there are really no last, no final campaigns, that each generation must renew and win again for itself the precious gift of liberty, the sacred heritage of freedom. Please tell them for me that I always thought being an American meant never being mean or small or giving into prejudice or bigotry, that it did mean trying to help the other fella and working for a world where every person knows freedom is both a blessing and a birthright. Tell them, too, of my fondest hope, my greatest dream for them, that they would always find here in America a land of hope, a light unto the nations, a shining city upon a hill, so that they would be able to say in their time, as we've said in ours, I'm proud to be an American, where at last I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, because there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. 360 years ago in 1620, a group of families dared to cross a mighty ocean to build a future for themselves in a new world. When they arrived at Plymouth, Massachusetts, they formed what they called a compact, an agreement among themselves to build a community and abide by its laws. This single act, the voluntary binding together of free people to live under the law, set the pattern for what was to come. A century and a half later, the descendants of those people pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to found this nation. Some forfeited their fortunes and their lives. None sacrificed honor. 87 years later, Abraham Lincoln called upon the people of all America to renew their dedication and their commitment to a government of, for, and by the people. Isn't it once again time to renew our compact of freedom, to pledge to each other all that is best in our lives, all that gives meaning to them, for the sake of this our beloved and blessed land? It's impossible to capture in words the splendor of this vast continent which God has granted as our portion of his creation. There are no words to express the extraordinary strength and character of this breed of people we call American. They are the kind of men and women Tom Paine had in mind when he wrote during the darkest days of the American Revolution, "We have it in our power to begin the world over again." It's recorded that shortly after the Declaration of Independence was signed in Philadelphia, celebrations took place throughout the land. What a contrast with the sober scene that has taken place a short time earlier in Independence Hall. 56 men came forward to sign the parchment. It was noted at the time that they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors. And that was more than rhetoric. Each of those men knew the penalty for high treason to the crown. "We must all hang together," Benjamin Franklin said, "or assuredly we will all hang separately." And John Hancock, it is said, wrote his signature in large script so King George could see it without his spectacles. They were brave. They stayed brave through all the bloodshed of the coming years. Their courage created a nation built on a universal claim to human dignity, on the proposition that every man, woman, and child had a right to a future of freedom. For just a moment, let us listen to the words again. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Thinking back to those times, one realizes that our forefathers were motivated by something bigger than themselves. Those patriot soldiers were sustained by the ideal of human freedom. Some historians have called the War of Independence the crucial test of our young republic as it fought for its life against what was then the strongest nation on earth. Our nation fought for freedom from Quebec to Saratoga, from Camden and Cowpens to Germantown, Valley Forge and Monmouth. But those Americans were not professional soldiers at all. They were from all walks of life, anxious to return to their families and the building of a nation. By Yorktown, they were veterans.
Don't shoot! We give up! Don't shoot! We surrender! We surrender! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! We surrender!
As the British marched between the Allied armies to the field of surrender, tears streamed down many of their faces. Their musicians played a tune popular in England at the time. Yes, the world turned upside down. And that's just what the colonists had done. On that day in 1781, a philosophy found a people, and the world would never be the same. We have come to this field to celebrate the triumph of an idea, that freedom will eventually triumph over tyranny. It is and always will be a warning to those who would usurp the rights of others. Time will find them beaten. The beacon of freedom shines here for all who will see, inspiring free men and captives alike and no wall, no curtain, nor totalitarian state can shut it out. The promise made on July 4th was kept on October 19th. The dream described in that Pennsylvania hall was fulfilled on this Virginia field. Through courage, the support of our allies, and by the gracious hand of God, a revolution was won. A people were set free, and the world witnessed the most exciting adventure in the history of nations, the beginning of the United States of America. It was in 1787 that the revolution truly began. For it was with the writing of our Constitution, setting down the architecture of democratic government, that the noble sentiments and brave rhetoric of 1776 took on substance, that the hopes and dreams of the revolutionists could become a living, enduring reality. All men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Until that moment, some might have said that was just a high-blown sentiment, the dreams of a few philosophers and their hot-headed followers. But could one really construct a government, run a country with such idealistic notions? But once those ideals took root in living, functioning institutions, once those notions became a nation, well then, as I said, the revolution could really begin, not just in America, but around the world. A revolution to free man from tyranny of every sort and secure his freedom the only way possible in this world, through the checks and balances and institutions of limited democratic government. If our Constitution has endured through times perilous as well as prosperous, it has not been simply as a plan of government, no matter how ingenious or inspired that might be. This document that we honor today has always been something more to us, filled with a deeper feeling than one of simple admiration, a feeling, one might say, more of reverence. One scholar described our Constitution as a kind of covenant. It is a covenant we've made not only with ourselves, but with all of mankind. It's a human covenant. Yes, and beyond that, a covenant with the Supreme Being, to whom our founding fathers did constantly appeal for assistance. It is an oath of allegiance to that in man is truly universal, that core of being that exists before and beyond distinctions of class, race, or national origin. It is a dedication of faith to the humanity we all share, that part of each man and woman that most closely touches on the divine. We're entering our third century now, but it's wrong to judge our nation by its years. The calendar can't measure America because we were meant to be an endless experiment in freedom with no limit to our reaches, no boundaries to what we can do, no end point to our hopes. The United States Constitution is the impassioned and inspired vehicle by which we travel through history. It grew out of the most fundamental inspiration of our existence, that we are here to serve Him by living free, that living free releases in us the noblest of impulses and the best of our abilities, that we would use these gifts for good and generous purposes and would secure them not just for ourselves and for our children, but for all mankind. Over the years, and I won't count if you don't, nothing has been so heartwarming to me as speaking to America's young, and the little ones especially, so fresh-faced and so eager to know. Well, from time to time, I've been with them, they will ask about our Constitution. And I hope you members of Congress will not deem this a breach of protocol if you'll permit me to share these thoughts again with the young people who might be listening or watching this evening. I've read the constitutions of a number of countries, including the Soviet Unions. Now, some people are surprised to hear that they have a constitution, and it even supposedly grants a number of freedoms to its people. Many countries have written into their constitution provisions for freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. But if this is true, Why is the Constitution of the United States so exceptional? Well, the difference is so small that it almost escapes you. But it's so great, it tells you the whole story in just 3 words. We the people. In those other constitutions, the government tells the people of those countries what they're allowed to do. In our Constitution, we the people tell the government what it can do, and it can do only those things listed in that document and no others. Virtually every other revolution in history has just exchanged one set of rulers for another set of rulers. Our revolution is the first to say the people are the masters and government is their servant. And you young people out there, don't ever forget that. Someday you could be in this room, but wherever you are, America is depending on you to reach your highest and be your best, because here in America, we the people are in charge. Just 3 words, some words. We the people. Those are the kids on Christmas Day looking out from a frozen sentry post on the 38th parallel in Korea, or aboard an aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean, a million miles from home, but doing their duty. We the people, those are the warm-hearted whose numbers we can't begin to count, who will begin the day with a little prayer for the hostages they will never know and MIA families they will never meet. Why? Because that's the way we are, this unique breed we call Americans. We the people, they're farmers on tough times, but who never stop feeding a hungry world. And you'll forgive me a special memory. It's a million mothers like Nellie Reagan who never knew a stranger or turned a hungry person away from her kitchen door. We the people. They refute last week's television commentary, downgrading our optimism and our idealism. They are the entrepreneurs, the builders, the pioneers, and a lot of regular folks, the true heroes of our land who make up the most uncommon nation of doers in history. You know they're Americans because their spirit is as big as the universe, and their hearts are bigger than their spirits. We the people, starting the 3rd century of a dream and standing up to some cynic who's trying to tell us we're not going to get any better. Are we at the end? Well, I can't tell it any better than the real thing. A story recorded by James Madison from the final moments of the Constitutional Convention, September 17th, 1787. As the last few members signed the document, Benjamin Franklin, the oldest delegate at 81 years and in frail health, looked over toward the chair where George Washington daily presided. At the back of that chair was painted the picture of the sun on the horizon. And turning to those sitting next to him, Franklin observed that artists found it difficult in their painting to distinguish between a rising and a setting sun. And I know if we were there, we could see those delegates sitting around Franklin, leaning in to listen more closely to him. And then Dr. Franklin began to share his deepest hopes and fears about the outcome of their efforts. And this is what he said. I have often looked at that picture behind the president without being able to tell whether it was a rising or setting sun. But now at length I have the happiness to know that it is a rising and not a setting sun. But you can bet it's rising, because my fellow citizens, America isn't finished. Her best days have just begun.
Proverbs tell us that without a vision, the people perish. When asked what great principle holds our union together, Abraham Lincoln said, something in the Declaration giving liberty, not alone to the people of this country, but hope to the world for all future time. We honor the giants of our history not by going back, but forward to the dreams their vision foresaw. My fellow citizens, this nation is poised for greatness. The time has come to proceed toward a great new challenge, a second American revolution of hope and opportunity. A revolution carrying us to new heights of progress by pushing back frontiers of knowledge and space. A revolution of spirit that taps the soul of America, enabling us to summon greater strength than we've ever known. And a revolution that carries beyond our shores the golden promise of human freedom in a world at peace. Let us begin by challenging our conventional wisdom. There are no constraints on the human mind, no walls around the human spirit, no barriers to our progress except those we ourselves erect. And tonight, we declare anew to our fellow citizens of the world, freedom is not the sole prerogative of a chosen few. It is the universal right of all God's children. Look to where peace and prosperity flourish today. It is in homes that freedom built. Victories against poverty are greatest and peace most secure, where people live by laws that ensure free press, free speech, and freedom to worship, vote, and create wealth. Our mission is to nourish and defend freedom and democracy and to communicate these ideals everywhere we can.
We Americans make no secret of our belief in freedom. In fact, it's something of a national pastime. Freedom is the right to question and change the established way of doing things. It is the continuing revolution of the marketplace. It is the understanding that allows us to recognize shortcomings and seek solutions. It is the right to put forth an idea scoffed at by the experts and watch it catch fire among the people. It is the right to dream, to follow your dream, or stick to your conscience, even if you're the only one in a sea of doubters. Freedom is the recognition that no single person, no single authority or government has a monopoly on the truth, but that every individual life is infinitely precious. Every one of us put on this world has been put there for a reason and has something to offer. Let me cite one of the most eloquent contemporary passages on human freedom from one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, Boris Pasternak, in the novel Dr. Zhivago. He writes, "I think that if the beast who sleeps in man could be held down by threats, any kind of threat, whether of jail or of retribution after death, then the highest emblem of humanity would be the lion tamer in the circus with his whip, not the prophet who sacrificed himself. But this is just the point. What has for centuries raised man above the beast is not the cudgel, but an inward music, the irresistible power of unarmed truth."
All of us together are part of a great revolution, and it's only just begun. America will never give up, never go back, never. We were born to be a special place between the two great oceans, with a unique message to carry freedom's torch. To a tired and disillusioned world, we've always been a light of hope where all things are possible. You know, throughout my life, I've seen America do the impossible. We survived a Great Depression that toppled many governments throughout the world. We came back from Pearl Harbor to win the greatest military victory in world history. In a single lifetime, my own, we have gone from horse and buggy to sending astronauts to the moon. We, as Americans, have fought harder. We've paid a higher price. done more to advance the freedom and dignity of man than any other people who ever lived on this earth. Ours is the land of the free because it is the home of the brave. And America's future will always be great because our nation will be strong. And our people will be free because we will be united. One people, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't know all the national anthems in the world, but I don't know of any that end with a question. Yes, the question was the one that Francis Scott Key asked, did we see? Could we see that banner through the smoke and the bomb burst when morning came?
You can imagine his joy when the next morning, in the dawn's early light, he looked out and saw the banner still flying, a little tattered and torn and worse for wear, but still flying proudly above the ramparts. Fort McHenry and the brave men manning it had withstood the assault. The United States, this great experiment in human freedom, as George Washington described it, would endure. But with the birth of our nation, the cause of human freedom had become forever tied to that flag and its survival. As the American Republic grew and prospered and new stars were added to the flag, the ideal of freedom grew and prospered. From the mountains of Kentucky to the shores of California to the Sea of Tranquility on the moon, our pioneers carried our flag before them, a symbol of the indomitable spirit of a free people. And let us never forget that in honoring our flag, we honor the American men and women who have courageously fought and died for it over the last 200 years. Patriots who set an ideal above any consideration of self, who suffered for it the greatest hardships. Our flag flies free today because of their sacrifice. Heroes are not supermen, Herman Wouk once reminded us. They're good men and embody by the cast of destiny the virtue of a whole people in a great hour. And writing of the thousands of such heroes in our nation, men and women who wear our country's uniform in this troubled peace of ours, he asked us never to forget, to reassure them that their hard-long training is needed, that love of country is noble, that self-sacrifice is rewarding, that to be ready to fight for freedom fills a man with a sense of worth like nothing else. And he said, if America is still the great beacon in dense gloom, the promise to hundreds of millions of the oppressed that liberty exists, that it is the shining future, that they can throw off their tyrants and learn freedom and cease learning war, then we still need heroes to stand guard in the night. Well, so too, we must carry on. We must stay at our post. We must keep faith with their sacrifice. In our great hour, we must answer as did they, the call of history. It's a summons that, as a nation or a people, we did not seek, but it is a call we cannot shirk or refuse. A call to wage war against war, to stand for freedom until freedom can stand alone, to live for liberty until liberty is the blessing and birthright of every man, woman, and child on this earth. And let us remember a final duty,
to understand that these men made themselves immortal by dying for something immortal. That theirs is the best to be asked of any life, a sharing of the human heart, a sharing in the infinite. In giving themselves for others, they made themselves special, not just to us, but to their God. Greater love than this has no man than to lay down his life for his friends. And because God is love, we know he was there with them when they died, and that he is with them still. We know they live again, not just in our hearts, but in his arms. And we know they've gone before to prepare a way for us. So today we remember them in sorrow and in love. We say goodbye. And as we submit to the will of him who made us, we pray together the words of Scripture. Lord, now let thy servants go in peace. Thy word has been fulfilled.
We're not a warlike people, quite the opposite. We always seek to live in peace. We resort to force infrequently and with great reluctance, and only after we've determined that it's absolutely necessary. We are awed, and rightly so, by the forces of destruction at loose in the world in this era. But neither can we be naive or foolish. 4 times in my lifetime, America has gone to war, bleeding the lives of its young men into the sands of island beachheads, the fields of Europe, and the jungles and rice paddies of Asia. We know only too well that war comes not when the forces of freedom are strong. It is when they are weak that tyrants are tempted. We simply cannot learn these lessons the hard way again without risking our destruction. Of all the objectives we seek, first and foremost is the establishment of lasting world peace. We must always stand ready to negotiate in good faith, ready to pursue any reasonable avenue that holds forth the promise of lessening tensions and furthering the prospects of peace. But let our friends and those who may wish us ill take note. The United States has an obligation to its citizens and to the people of the world never to let those who would destroy freedom dictate the future course of life on this planet.
So tonight, we reaffirm that Jew and Gentile, we are one nation under God, that black and white, we are one nation indivisible, that Republican and Democrat, we are all Americans. Tonight, with heart and hand, through whatever trial and travail, we pledge ourselves to each other and to the cause of human freedom, the cause that has given light to this land and hope to the world.
Whether we come from poverty or wealth, from big cities or small towns, we are all equal in the eyes of God. But as Americans, that's not enough. We must be equal in the eyes of each other. We can no longer judge each other on the basis of what we are, but must instead start finding out who we are. America, our origins matter less than our destinations, and that's what democracy is all about. My fellow citizens, those of you here at this hall, and those of you at home, I want you to know that I have always had the highest respect for you, for your common sense and intelligence, and for your decency. I have always believed in you and in what you could accomplish for yourselves and for others. And whatever else history may say about me when I'm gone, I hope it will record that I appealed to your best hopes, not your worst fears, to your confidence rather than your doubts. My dream is that you will travel the road ahead with liberty's lamp guiding your steps and opportunity's arm steadying your way. My hope is that you will love your country not for her power or wealth, but for her selflessness and idealism. May each of you have the heart to conceive, the understanding to direct, and the hand to execute works that will make the world a little better for your having been here. May all of you as Americans never forget your heroic origins, never fail to seek divine guidance, and never lose your natural, God-given optimism. May every dawn be a great new beginning for America, and every evening bring us closer to that shining city upon a hill. I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it and see it still. And how stands the city on this winter night? After 200 years, 2 centuries, she still stands strong and true on the granite ridge, and her glow is held steady no matter what storm. And she's still a beacon, still a magnet for all who must have freedom, for all the pilgrims from all the lost places who are hurtling through the darkness toward home. This nation is a refuge for all those people on earth who long to breathe free. During the last 2 centuries, some 50 million people from every corner of the globe have flocked to our shores. Some of them crawled over walls, under barbed wire, through minefields, or risked their lives in leaky makeshift boats to escape oppression. As we go about our daily lives, let us remember the price that so many are willing to pay for freedom. We have a statue in New York Harbor that speaks of this, a statue of a woman holding the torch of welcome to those who enter our country to become Americans. She has greeted millions upon millions of immigrants to our country. She welcomes them still. She represents our open door. She was silhouetted very clear. One of them wrote about standing on deck as their ship entered New York Harbor. We passed her very slowly. Of course, we had to look up. She was beautiful. Another talked of how all the passengers rushed to one side of the boat for a fast look at their new home. And at her, everybody was crying. We sometimes forget that even those who came here first to settle the new land were also strangers. I've spoken before of the tiny Arabella, a ship at anchor just off the Massachusetts coast. A little group of Puritans huddled on the deck. Then John Winthrop, who would later become the first governor of Massachusetts, reminded his fellow Puritans there on that tiny deck that they must keep faith with their God, that the eyes of all the world were upon them. They must be a light unto the nations of all the world, a shining city upon a hill. Call it mysticism, if you will. I have always believed there
was some divine providence that placed this great land here between the two great oceans to be found by a special kind of people from every corner of the world who had a special love for freedom and a special courage that enabled them to leave their own land, leave their friends and their countrymen, and come to this new and strange land to build a new world of peace and freedom and hope. We're bound together because, like them, we too dare to hope. Hope that our children will always find here the land of liberty in a land that is free. We dare to hope, too, that we'll understand our work can never be truly done until every man, woman, and child shares in our gift, in our hope, and stands with us in the light of liberty as it has upon us for 2 centuries, keeping faith with a dream of long ago and guiding millions still to a future of peace and freedom.